There you go. Sorry, Cole. Welcome everyone into the coaches forum this evening. This should be a great discussion and very educational. So I'm going to turn this over to Ralph Paulsen, who was very instrumental in getting the four coaches to participate tonight. Ralph, it's all yours.
Thank you, Paul. I'm excited about tonight. Making the transition for me from college coaching for 38 years into officiating over the last 3 years has been an interesting journey. And one of the things that I felt like I wanted to see happen was this continued relationship, improving the relationship between coaches and referees. And anytime that we can bring coaches and referees together for the betterment of the game, I think it's an exciting time. So I'm excited about tonight. Let me introduce the four coaches. Samar Hazim. She was at Campbell University. Now she serves as the head coach at Villanova. Brandy Fontaine, just recently at High Point University, now at UNC Charlotte. Mike Noonan, Clemson University, and Todd Yeagley, Indiana University. And I think what we had talked about doing was giving each coach 10 to 15 minutes to share their thoughts and their ideas on how we can improve the game from an officiating standpoint. And we decided we'd go in alphabetical order. So Samar, it's all you.
Thank you for the introduction, Ralph. I'm really honored to be on this call. I'm excited to listen to some things and share some things. You know, I've been very fortunate to work with some incredible officials and assigners in my time. And, you know, I know it's not an easy job. Coaches are crazy. Everyone knows we're crazy. We're highly competitive. And, you know, we can sometimes be combative on the sideline when that competitiveness gets overzealous. And we're also, you know, we have the unique job of developing and coaching 18 to 22 now with COVID 23 and 24-year-olds. And sometimes that pressure of having to help them, you know, they're not professionals, you know, really work through what they're doing is difficult. I think the first thing that really stands out for me is communication. You know, what we find is in the college game, there is so much disparity in the subjectivity of fouls, and one official maybe, you know, consistently doing SEC games, which are typically a little bit more direct, a little bit more physical. And I say typically because they're not all like that. That game is going to be very transitional based, a little bit more physical than maybe an ACC game is going to be. And we find that an official that we might get on a Thursday night may be a lot more hands off as far as, you know, considering what might be a foul and what might not be. And then an official that we get on Sunday may be a little bit more hands on. And so for me as a coach, I can make adjustments. I can make adjustments to personnel or how we're going to play based off of what I feel the official really constitutes as a foul versus not. And what I find difficult is when we're trying to understand why something was a foul, because Thursday night, the player did the exact same thing and she might not be called on as being aggressive. Whereas Sunday, she gets a yellow card, potentially looking at a red card, depending on how many fouls she accumulates in the game. And now she's out on Thursday because our games are so compressed in a tight amount of space. So just having those open lines of communication allow coaches, and I can speak for myself, allow a lot of coaches that really need to make adjustments, to talk to their players, because that can really change things in a season with how many games we play in a short amount of time. So that's one of the first things that I thought of. I figured I'd start with one rather than taking 15 minutes of speaking, and then I'd come back and share some others.
Randy, I'd like to turn it over to you.
All right. Same as, you know, what Samara was saying, I'm very honored to be here. So thank you all for having me. I too feel the same way about I'll reiterate what Samar said. To go to another level of that, I would just say for me, it's more about like the consistency just within one game. So whether it's, just in, throughout the one game, or as opposed to going even to the second game, it's just, if we have the communication piece, we can help educate our players better. Because sometimes we don't know what it is exactly that they're calling, but I think hearing that is extremely helpful. And then, like I said, just being able to have the consistency throughout the game. The other piece that I'll add on to it is, just understanding the difference of the teams that that are playing. So, I have a very possession-based team. That's kind of what I build my team around. And then if you play against a team that's maybe not as very possession-based, I know they get very frustrated at times, and the late hits, that it seems to be that refs miss that a lot against possession-based teams, or, that are other teams that are attacking possession-based teams or defending them. It just seems to be what I've found is some of those late hits that people are coming in against those players. So those are my two biggest pieces, adding on to what Samar had as well. So I don't have much more else to add unless someone else adds in something new as well, and I can, speak of that as well.
Okay. We will be back. We'll come back to you for sure. Coach Noonan.
Well, again, thank you for everybody for having us. And, I'm going to take up the extra time that Samar and Coach Chastain left behind. I'm only kidding, but I think it's important. Those who know me, obviously, the game is a passion for all of us. And I think that's not saying something different for the referees versus the coaches. And the reason why I'm on the call is because I heard from Paul Tamburino that Todd Yeagley was going to be on the call, and we played them in the first game this year, and I didn't want him to have any advantage. So when it came to the refereeing, so I made sure that I begged Ralph Paulsen that I could be on the call as well. So no, it is really an honor, and I've done this once before with Ralph during the season, and not quite as large a group, but I think it's so that we collaborate together as coaches and referees. And another suggestion that I might make moving forward, because for the next 10 minutes is the world according to Mike, is because one of the things that I think is important for everybody to understand is that the referees that referee our games are very, very professional, but it does not necessarily impact their decisions, don't necessarily impact their livelihood the way that they can impact the livelihood of the coaches and their families. And I think that's important for people to understand. Because everything we do, this is, what we do for a living, and our families are impacted by wins and losses. And those major decisions that the referees do make in the games sometimes can impact the decision, particularly when you're dealing with administrators and athletic directors who don't necessarily have a lot of experience in the game, understand it at the level that both the referees and the coaches do. And I think that, the way that, and Samir talked about communication. And I think that initially, as we approach things, both as coaches and referees, if we have an attitude to serve the game and the participants first and foremost, not that we're doing our job, not that we're getting a paycheck, but that we're serving the game and we're serving the participants and trying to grow the game. I think that's a starting point for the communication. I think that the growth of the game is important, particularly the college game right now, and the landscape that both the women's and the men's game is on. I think it's important for us to understand that contextually, as there's so much change going on in college athletics. And I think that does help us. And I think that this group and this body of referees are important also to help with decisions that affect the game. We just had one change, a major change, that there's not going to be overtime this year, right? There's a couple modeling, season modeling situations that are on the table. The women have one, the men have another. I think that video replay is another area that politically the refereeing body can weigh in on and help us to grow the game, not just the coaches, and that we can collaborate on those issues. The time, right? There was a survey, and there has been a survey for many, many years as I've been involved with this. One of the things that I find that is each year is challenging is managing the clock and the clock issues inconsistency. With at the end of the game, some referees, and we saw it in the men's college cup, a foul is called at the end of the game, and the referee immediately stopped the clock and allowed the free kick to be taken. How that's communicated pregame, how that's communicated at the beginning of the season, and how these issues that affect the game potentially and the outcome of games, I think are really important. And we see a lot of inconsistency in that from conference to conference, game to game. I think that another pet peeve of mine is that I feel at times the referees that are refereeing the game, they need to referee, and many of you who referee games probably heard it come out of my mouth. I said, referee the game, not the scoreboard. Right? If you go to some places, they keep the number of fouls on the scoreboard for each team, and it'll be 12-2 at the end of the first half for one team, and the next thing you know, you look up 10 minutes in the second half and it's 12-12. Or the game's at 2-0 and there's a pretty clear foul in the penalty box, and the referee, at 3-0, the game's probably iced. And maybe in the first 10 minutes of the game, it's kind of the baseball analogy. Was that a strike at the beginning of the game as much as it was a strike at the end of the game? So refereeing and making decisions based on the game and the rules and not necessarily the scoreboard, I think it is important. I think that, and I talked about this on the last referee webinar I was on with Ralph, is that the pregame meeting is really, really important to set the tone and set the communication between the coaches and the referees. And I think that if a referee, some referees, everybody's different, right? Everybody has different personalities. We're all human. We've got different ways that we're approaching things as we go forward. But to have some type of interaction between both coaches and the referees prior to the game, I think it's important for them to understand and to at least get a sense of the impression that the coaches make on the referee and the referee makes on the coach. And I think that's a really, really important element to the game. We've had many games where referees warm up away from the bench side, and then introductions happen. They walk out and they haven't spoken to either coach, or on contrary, have spoken to one and not the other. And I know that you guys are trained differently and not to do those things, but these are things that are important, that are noticed by coaches. The next thing I'll talk about is the preparation, and I think Coach Chastain talked about this a little bit, is how, more and more as the referees have become more involved in the game, more professional in what they're doing, they are preparing for the game the same way we do with our scouting reports. right? And whether it's through their past experience with the team, depending on how many times they've refereed that team, not just in the current season, but in past seasons. What lens are they putting on about certain players, certain coaches, and how much preparation have they done for where teams are in the standings, what happened in the last game? Those types of things are important, just as important as it is for us as we scout teams, for referees, and also to stay in that space where they're, again, it's the 90 minutes that's ahead of them, more than anything, but they have to have some type of preparation, I think, in order to understand the teams that they're about to be involved with. And then, really the last thing that I would add to that is, the question that I'd ask the referees, the same question that I ask our players, same questions I ask my staff and the coaches, is what makes the game better for all? And what makes the games better for us as referees, right? Obviously, it's not the lunatic maniac Coach Noonan on the sideline screaming and shouting at the referee of the final, which did happen. But what makes the game better for all of us? And having a holistic look at, really we are serving the players, we're serving the game. And I don't mean to get on a white horse, but I think that's a really, that's what we do. And that's what all of us are in this for. So I'll leave it at that and pass it on to Todd.
Before Todd goes, sorry to cut you off, Todd, I want to jump on something Coach Noonan talked about, which is the pregame meeting. And I'd like to give a female perspective here. And again, I know I don't speak for everyone, but it's in a world where females are the minority, even coaching females, officials, there's not too many. There are certainly, it's a growing number, but there's not too many officials. We might show up to a game and the coach of the opponent is a male and the 4 officials are males. And it says a lot as a female coach when all 4 officials spend their time completely focused on the opponent's coach in that pregame meeting, making eye contact, listening and speaking with the opponent's coach. It may be unintentional, but when the game gets underway, calls start being made. As a female coaching females, it's difficult not to recognize what biases may be played in or not played in. But just a thought there in that, especially in that pregame meeting, what type of tone is being set in the women's game, at least with female coaches. Sorry, Todd.
No, that's good. Thanks so much for inviting me to come on. A lot of, I don't get to see faces, but some names I recognize, and certainly some of the panelists I've had a lot of time with through the years. It's, the relationship with the officials and the communication is essential. And, I've been fortunate because I've had a mentor with my father that has always had a deep respect for the game, but also the officials that are a big part of the game. And I get to see that firsthand. And I try every day to try to emulate that in how we communicate and how we use ourselves as examples in front of our team and our players. And we all have moments of weakness. Certainly we all are very emotional, as Mike said. There's a lot on the line. And we want the officials to feel as though they understand that and know that every decision there is an impact on all of us, the athletes, the coaches. And you can see the officials that have great pride in their work, and the ones that have come really prepared, that have understand the matchup. They understand the players in each team, tendencies. of what they might do that could affect a call in any way. And it's great to hear that when you have a pregame talk of like, Coach, we understand, we know where we need to call this. We're going to call a little tighter or whatnot. And that gets back down to that communication piece, which I think as coaches, we have to do a better job in as a group to not have an arm's distance with our officials and to have that rapport. And that starts also with showing with your players the respect that needs to go to the officials. And I would love to see more officials come over and calm the sideline down much quicker. When a coach is out of order or you feel like you need to be heard. And oftentimes that's a lot of it. We often just want to make sure we're being heard. And with technologies today, that's a new challenge because we're not quite sure it is getting communicated. And some of the, I would call it the older, more experienced officials will come over and often give a gesture or a nod that, Todd, I'm getting the message on what you're communicating to the fourth in a certain situation. That's massive because honestly, I may not know it's getting there. And I just need to make sure that maybe our message is being heard. The importance of every official in the game is critical, and also how the game might be changing with technology. With the ARs, the flag is not going up as much. And I remember there was a scenario last year. I spoke to Steve after a game. I said, "Yeah, man, the official. I'm so glad he saw the penalty late. It was against Notre Dame, a big call late in the game, and I go, it was just disappointing. The AR had a great view, and he didn't raise his flag." And he goes, "No, Todd, he made the call. He saw it. He communicated to the center, and the right call was made." And I said, "Well, that's great to know," because I was a little disappointed after the game because I said to him, "Did you not see that? I'm glad you got it right." And I gave the head official a lot of credit for an important call. And that communication is what's so important that we have with the coaches and the officials. The fourth official, we're fortunate to have those all the time. And those vary quite a bit with one, not only involvement, but also the ability to communicate to us as coaches. We're on the opposite side of the AR. And honestly, I do that on purpose because I honestly feel the official will probably be tired of the visiting coach talking too much, and that's only going to benefit. But in all seriousness, the fourth ability to, again, message what is needed is critical. And it might be a small thing of when the ball is out of play, getting the right call made on the throw. And some are really active in giving those extra gestures to the center, others not. And that can get frustrating because we're seeing we know you see things, we just want that to be communicated in whichever measure that can be. So it gets a lot back to the communication and consistency. I think all of us coaches, is something my father implemented very early in his career, that we do a rules test in our preseason. We take it seriously. It's not a test that they take it and then we give them the grade and they're gone. The test is done, and then we spend probably 45 minutes going over every question. And we don't want our team to be the one that's arguing about something or quite honestly being ignorant about the rules of the game when they're asking questions or complaining about something when they don't know the rules. And certainly our players are not going to always know everything. But we think it's important. I think it respects the game and it respects the officials. You see it at our level. There'll be coaches and players from other teams that are saying things that are they don't know the rules. And I think that's not good for our game. So I'm hoping that more coaches do it and add that. It's not like the NCAA rule. Like we do a little bit of everything in that test. We do some questions regarding college rules that are different than maybe what they came from. And then it's fun to see our players engage in that. because there'll be, we use a lot of like pro clips for teaching moments, and they'll use rules as well. And there was a goal that one of our kids sent in our group chat. It was, a penalty kick with Kansas City a couple of years ago, and a pretty established international took the strike and goes off the post, comes back, and he finishes the rebound, and he's arguing with the ref, and the guy sent it to the group like, can you believe this guy doesn't even know the rules in the penalty? And yet a couple of the other guys in the other team immediately raised their hand going, no, he can't kick that, and didn't touch the keeper, for an example. So you see at the highest levels, just small details are the difference in our case of winning the game and respecting the game. So I hope more coaches do that. And then at the same time, as mentioned already by the panel, you guys have a really challenging job. And, when everyone does get animated, just again, understanding and putting yourself in the shoes of those on the other side. And we need to do a better job too of understanding of what you're going through. But we also have to understand what, also when you jump levels, and we have some MLS officials that will call a game and also have a very quick whistle, a quick temperament, because they've just been berated by some mature pros. And all of a sudden one of our kids says something to question something. It's an immediate response of like, no, I'm not going to hear it from you, little 18-year-old. And they understand like that's a teaching moment. Talk to them, help them. Our players love it when an official says, hey, give them something to do better versus immediately overreacting in the heat of the moment. So those are just some general thoughts.
Thanks, Todd. Thank you. Thanks to all of you guys. So it's in this transition for me from coach to referee. Couple of things that I've noticed and a couple of changes, and I want to throw this out for discussion. And I've mentioned this to several people, and the four of you all I chose for a reason, and it's the level of professionalism with which you handle yourselves on the sidelines. I've coached against some of you all. I've refereed. I've been part of the officiating crew for some of you all. Todd, I've worked for the NCAA. As a site rep for a couple of your games. But I've had the opportunity to watch and just see how you engage. But one of my concerns and something that I have been talking about has been one voice and on the sidelines. I look at the professional game and the coaching staff has a responsibility to the players, to the head coach, but the communication it comes from the head coach. And I know, Mike, I'm gonna single you out because I've had an opportunity to do a number of your games as a fourth official, and that's one of the things that's always stood out to me, serving in that role, is that it's your voice, it's you that addresses your concerns, the concerns for your team. So with that in mind, I'd like to kind of get some thoughts from you all about the idea of one voice on the sideline, that of the head coach. So anybody that'd like to take that on?
I'll take a stab at it, Ralph. I 100% agree. And nothing gets the demeanor of the game going when there's multiple voices. And you know what it is? A lot of times it's, everyone's, trying to put themselves in position to be a head coach. And you can see a lot of sidelines that might have some assistants that are just, trying to make their voice heard. And ultimately comes down to the head coach controlling that. But at the same time, it's also nice to hear from the officials to help the head coach who maybe doesn't want to have quite that, doesn't feel as though they can say that to an assistant that, hey, please, let's hear one voice today. That actually helps the head coach manage their own assistants. because some may not be able to do that as effectively as others. So I think that would be a really good starting point. And that way we can keep, the assistants a bit quieter, but nothing gets the game more accelerated and chirpy was when the bench, and that goes for the players too. It's some benches, it's crazy to see what goes on. And it's very different from even the men's game to the women's game, from what I observe, and not the words, but just the amount of noise that comes from the touchline is amazing. Again, there's different ways to do it, but I think the noise from the sideline, from the benches is certainly one that we could do better.
Let me jump in and I appreciate all the comments. I'm jotting notes as everyone's speaking here. You've all received the link from the NCAA about the points of emphasis, and that's that's right at the top, benches behavior. And we've been stressing this in all of our clinics and every time we meet together with referees. And I've always said that, though, we don't want anybody sent off. That's for sure. We don't. But in some cases, it's gotten out of control. And I hope we don't see many red cards for bench personnel. But I'm going to predict we're going to see, more red cards from bench personnel throughout the country because it's such a big change and such a point of emphasis by the NCAA.
Yeah, Ralph, you mentioned ours goes, it's not just the referees, it's my philosophy and feeling is that the players can't hear more than one voice. And if you're giving instruction to the players, so we've always just had that, it always comes through the head coach. And I've been pretty adamant with my staff throughout the years that their job is to filter that information through me. And that, if in fact, whether it's a referee or one of our players, that anything that needs to be said so they can identify with one voice, right? It's not, sometimes even the goalkeepers, that communication is important, and it can't be too much and it can't be too little either, right? It's got to be appropriate so that you are tuned in. And I think Todd hit a really good point earlier when he said, sometimes we just want to be acknowledged that we've been heard. The referees don't have to agree with it, but if there's some type of acknowledgement that we've been heard, that diffuses the situation very, very quickly for coaches. And I think that's a really good, I don't know whether you want to call it tip for the people on the call, the referees on the call, but if that's because if you feel like you haven't been heard, it's like any other conversation form of communication. Think about talking to your spouse or your significant other, right? If you feel you're not being heard, you're either going to get louder or you're going to be more adamant. And I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the productivity of why a coach is communicating. There's certainly going to be frustration there. I think, when you're looking at the college game, we're usually playing 2 games a week, and there's not a lot of time between those games. And so our bounce back, from what happened in the last game has to be very continuous and very short-lived. And that's an enjoyable pressure. But when we get into those games, there's sometimes those fuses are a little bit short. And I think Todd hit the nail on the head. There's human moments, but at the end of the day, it's about a productivity and communication. We tell my principle is to our team and our staff, we never ask for cards. That's a conversation I would have with the official if I feel things are getting out of hand, because it's meant to be productive. We understand that your jobs are hard. We understand that those jobs are difficult. Even in my angriest moments, I still understand that you have to make some really hard decisions. But just if everyone's yelling at you, then that conversation has gone from a potentially productive conversation where we're trying to get a message across or hear a message to just emotion, pure emotion. And that's not productive in any sense. But I would say, speaking on Ralph's behalf, that was, going off what Mike's saying, Coach Noonan saying, just being heard can really diffuse things. We were in a final match and I wasn't too happy about some things that were happening, and I didn't feel as though I was being heard. And Ralph put on his coach hat and came over and completely diffused the situation. He explained what was happening to me, and I could rationalize it and start making decisions to change what we needed to do personnel wise or momentum wise. So if we have everyone on the sidelines speaking, I don't think we can have those moments. But if we have officials that are willing to come speak with us, I think that can be very productive too.
We got a couple questions coming in here. And I'm going to paraphrase the one, how do you feel about referees talking to players? I don't want to say coaching them, but talking to players of trying to prevent them from committing a foul.
Contextually, Paul, you mean they've committed a foul prior and the next one's going to be a yellow card or worse? Is that what we're at?
It's more of like, don't foul there, don't foul there, don't foul him, don't foul him.
Oh, I see.
So that's a question from one of the participants.
I
Go ahead,
Brandy.
Summer.
I was just gonna say, I think, I don't think they should be, in my opinion. It's different when you're just giving like a warning, and you're letting them know, you're giving them that warning. But I think having conversation with the players is not good, because then sometimes you end up getting caught in that conversation. You don't see what's happening, other plays or other things that are happening. So I personally don't feel it should be happening. That's why, going back what Coach Noonan was saying to everybody, it's just, if you have that communication piece, it's happening with the coaches. It's the same thing. It should go through one outlet. If it's going to multiple people and we don't know the conversation that's happening, then we can't help that conversation or help those things from happening.
I think too, it's also in the context. It doesn't, stoppages kills games. And a lot of it can be done just on that little jog back, seeing the ball and saying, hey, careful on that challenge. That was close, and move on. And quick point, and then it's gone. Didn't have to make a big grandstand moment. The player gets the point. I really like that as a player. I just heard it and he's gone. I don't think a lot of the players certainly want to be kind of coached through what a foul is or not. That might become a bit much, but I think that little quick moment where it's not a big moment, because again, we always say the best job we can give a compliment for an official is, we just didn't notice you today. That's the best compliment you can give. Everything ran so smoothly and things were always handled in the right moment without it being part of the show. And some officials, you feel as though they want to be part of the show. And man, your job is critical, but the less that there is to notice, I think everyone is really happy. And certainly I'm sure you are too, as the official. So I think just those little moments, and some just do it really well and do it subtly. And getting back to communicating with the coaches, some coaches get a little agitated because they're like, well, he's talking to the one coach, not me. And some of the really good ones will go to one bench, quickly kind of run over and say, Todd, I've handled it. Like I've communicated to both of you now. And not where it's a big long talk, but it's handled quickly and it's done effectively, and we've moved on to the game. And because again, no one likes the big long stoppages.
I got some other questions coming from the people here. This is again the new rule change of overtime. How do you feel it is going to affect the game?
In terms of referees, Paul, or in terms of the game overall?
No, I think tactics, Mike. What's the tactics of other teams going to be, or refereeing? I mean, there's going to be a lot more pressure on the referee for sure, because it's going to end at 90. But what do you see your opponents doing, or, the tactics of the game, I guess I might say?
I'll be honest with you. I don't see it. I don't see a change. I may be naive, but it's the same in the first, if you've got sudden victory in overtime, right? I think that you may see the away team or the perceived inferior team lower in the standings may bunker a little bit more late. But you've got 90 minutes to get the job done. And that's, tactically, I don't see significant changes other than maybe, the road team or a team who's maybe at the bottom of the table. That's why I think it's important, the preparation for people to look and see, where do they stand in the table and who's doing what. But from a refereeing standpoint, I think the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes of a 90-minute game is the same as, the first 10 minutes. I stated that earlier, and I think it's the same as if the game went to overtime. I think the reason for the change in overtime is for, athlete wellness, injuries, but it shouldn't affect too much the referees now. Again, others could have completely different opinions, but we're, as a coaching staff right now, we're going into the season. That is not been something we've focused on. What are we going to do now that we only have 90 minutes?
I think it's the obvious taking time on every restart in the first 10 minutes of the game. It will have to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed even before there was overtime eliminated. I might be an outlier. I was not for that rule. I thought, to me, the better teams have a better chance to win. So I didn't like the rule change, but I'm a minority in that. But I think there's, official sees right from the beginning that the goalkeeper is completely using the clock in the first 5 minutes of a game. And it takes usually 2 or 3 reminders of like, are we going to keep the game going today? And that has to be, I think, a priority for the officials to keep the game going so that we don't have any more time lost with, again, the loss of overtime. And that goes, with guys taking throw-ins that are, left backs going across the field to the right side. I mean, that just chips away at the game. There's got to be a way to keep that. Is he on a jog? Is he moving quick enough? Because we want the ball, we want the game to be played. Not we don't want dead. We don't want less. We want less dead time.
This is another question. How has the game changed? Well, this person has said 5, but say, from 5 years ago to 7 years ago to today, what's the biggest change or some of the biggest changes that are right? Because we have, referees just coming into the college ranks, mainly from the amateur leagues of their area there, or maybe, Division II or Division III or junior college, and now they're making the jump to Division I. So what can they expect?
I think on the women's side is what I can speak of. The parity is so different, which means every single game is that much more meaningful, and every single point, whether it's 3 or 1, RPIs, standings, rankings, all of that is just so much more meaningful now. There's a much smaller margin for error, and so the decision making in those games from a referee can be a game changer, to not just the immediate game, but to potentially what happens through the season for a team.
Yeah, I would say again, there's more on the line. 7 to 10 years ago, you're not losing your job over not making the NCAA tournament in many situations, and that's both on the men's and the women's side of the the ledger. And then the second thing I would say is that the players are much more savvy. Right? They've been exposed to more. Todd just talked about time wasting tactics. I think that the players are savvier and understand gamesmanship and what they see in the leagues throughout the world and the higher levels. And that has come into the college game. And then again, that is also inclusive in, at least on the men's side, is that there are many more international players over the last 5 years who are coming into the game, who have been exposed to that. So that would be what I would see but everything else, right? Bigger, faster, better athletes. Sports science is a huge change in the game. Facilities are better. I mean, there's a lot of really good things that have happened over the last 5 to 7 years to make the game a lot better for everybody.
Coaches, what do you see in your opinion, in terms of the calls, the decisions the referees make, that we're still missing quite a bit more of those than we should? And what I mean by that is, is it like yellow cards for reckless fouls? You think we're not awarding or not issuing enough, or is it offside, or what are your thoughts on that? What have you noticed, or you feel is a trend where we're still missing quite a few of a certain call that you're surprised by it, or you think we should have more of those decisions, a higher percentage correct than we do so far?
I'll jump in. I think sometimes when we get on the penalty area, when there's a challenge and two people colliding, and it doesn't have to be a penalty or a dive. It is no calls. Those are okay. And I feel like sometimes there has to be a reaction to, well, he dove, or it's a penalty. And sometimes it's just a challenge that led to two people colliding in particular. And then I think also is the use of the advantage. It really showed its ugly head a little bit with COVID, with the hand whistles. It was a problem. And I did it same. I used it in practice. And I was trigger happy with calling things. But, the moment you have to pause between, okay, what's happening by the time your whistle goes to your mouth, I think officials get it more right. When it was the hand whistle, I thought a lot of things were called fast, and we lost some advantage moments. That again doesn't kill the game, and it allows the team to continue on with a better situation.
One of the things that I still find, and it's gotten better, but it's still's got a long way to go, is that the ARs continue to watch the ball instead of watching the last defender. And because many of them are refereeing, at least where we are, the ACC and the bigger conferences that we represent, many of those referees are center referees much of the time, than their ARs on our games. So they're used to being center referees, and what they do is they follow the action and watch the ball. And then that split second when they really need to know where that last defender is, and those are critical calls, those offside calls in the final thirds. And they consistently, if you really watch the ARs, either because they're the less experienced guys on the way up to be center referees, or, they really need to be trained. And, again, if we look at the leagues around the world, your ARs are not center referees. They're trained ARs. And I think that's a big issue with the college game.
Yeah,
So-
Mike, you're right. That's definitely a challenge. As Samar pointed, earlier, I said here where the games are so condensed. We have 18 games in 3 months. The referees are being pulled in every direction, whether it be, junior college, D1, D2, D3, high school, everything else, academy games, they're being pulled in every direction. So, hate to say that's a very difficult challenge, but it's a very difficult challenge to train ARs for sure, to have and we've done this in the past. We've had, people that work for Pro, Craig Lowry or CJ Morganti, Corey Rockwell come in and give on-field sessions with the referees. But you're right, they go from whistle to flag to fourth to flag to whistle. So it is a challenge, and I hear you, Michael. I hear you for sure.
I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix it, Paul. Right? But I'm just saying that's a big one, because those offsides calls a lot of times are critical to the game.
So on that note, let's talk about the video review. The coaches write the rules. The referees do have some say. We get the poll as well. And I know it's difficult. So a lot of schools don't have video review, even though all you need is an iPad. You don't need the big production. I know one more is introduced this year, inside or outside the penalty area. But what's important? We talk about them. We got offside decisions. We got red card decisions. We got penalty kick decisions. What do you as coaches generally talk about we need more video review of?
I think we've done good stages. Paul, jump in. Good stages. I think we've added a little bit as we go, and the technology definitely has to be up to speed. And also, we just have to be, again, super careful of how much we're stopping. I think the officials, have to communicate a bit better on, or the coaches need to know that no matter what you're saying, they're not the ones calling these reviews. And it gets really temperamental on the side, yelling for reviews. I think when things are missed off the ball, whether it's violent conduct, I think that's when, certainly as a coach, that's when I would be very animated that there was something that happened that you might have missed. But after that, it becomes much more of like everyone's kind of yelling to get a review. And it, again, can get a little bit tense on the touch. But it, I think layering on some of the new reviews is positive. Luckily we have a good system in the Big Ten to be able to have good vantage points. Are the officials well trained and efficient? There was a couple reviews that took a really long time to review. And then there was some officials actually brought a coach over to look at the review with them, but not the other coach. That was really surprising. And that really upset another coach, and happened in the game I was in, but that has to be consistent whether that ever happens. So there's just, I think, still a lot to learn. We're all, I think we're all learning with it. And we're not going to be what we're seeing on TV with the pro leagues. It can't be that efficient yet, but we're making some strides.
I have a question, and I want to have Coach Fontaine start off this. Coach Yeagley said the best referee is the one that you never really see. Okay, I get it. So starting with Coach Fontaine, and I'd like to hear from everybody, fill in the blank. That referee was good because why?
Didn't have to have a conversation with them or ask for a foul.
They were consistent. Open communication.
Coach Noonan?
I just wrote down consistent, their demeanor, humility, and communication.
Yeagley, were you always the last guy with the letter Y in your last name?
Well, I already said it. The one that you just did a great job. You just everything was managed super well. And that's really hard, though. I get it. There's going to be moments that maybe that may not be the case, but that definitely helps when they're just it's just everything's happening really fluid, and that the game sometimes you can't. It's just so hard to predict how the games are going to go sometimes, and coaches and officials, we all kind of get caught up in these, like, how'd this happen? How did it get this way? And you kind of want to peel it back. Like, what could we have done different 15 minutes ago to make it maybe better? What could have been said? How the tensions get to that point? And that probably could have been the answer to probably all that would have been, could there have been better communication? Potentially. Some coaches still are going to yell. I mean, it's just what it is. And it's frustrating sometimes as the other. Again, I've certainly, Mark, you've heard me. I'm not been perfect to you. I mean, I've yelled at you, I'm sure, plenty of time. But my point is, you all the officials do know which ones are typically the most. I wouldn't say obnoxious in the silence, a bad word, but just raises the temperature of the game. And because we don't have these, I just got done watching that Crew game. What a phenomenal stadium! But we also hear so much, you and the players, from what's being said on the touchline. Where in the big games, you don't hear the sideline. So every coach that says something, every player that says something from the touchline, it amplifies the game. Oftentimes, unless the environment's going to be super loud, like it's going to be for the Clemson IU game, which we won't be able to hear ourselves, I'm sure, in that game. But that's where the bench, I think, can really change the temperature of the game in a good way or negative way.
Todd, make sure you bring your band, because our band will be right behind you, playing as loud as possible. The consistency piece, I think, is really, really important, right? Because you go into a game, and again, yes, there might be Thursday's game or Sunday's game or Tuesday's game or Friday's game as we in the men's, but we can adjust, right? As coaches, this is a foul. Okay, it's a foul for this team. It's a foul for that team, right? And that's something that infuriates, and where the fouls are called too. And I've had that situation. The best referees know how to manage a game, and a foul at midfield is not a foul around the top of the box. And I've seen both sides of that be very, very consistent and very, very good. And well, what are you talking about? There were 17 fouls for each team. Yeah, well, 12 of those fouls were around the box for one team, and 12 of them were at midfield for the other team. So,
yeah, that's another point too, talking about, Mike, with the no overtime. The restarts, as we know, 30-35% of goals. Historically, every free kick that's in and around the box is going to be that much more pivotal with the rule change. So you got to call them. And again, we hate to see, and Mike made reference to the way the game's going, or officiating the score line, or what have you. But those calls near on the box are critical, and we just hope those get as much right as we can. And we're not going to get them all right, we know that, but those are such critical plays, critical calls, or no calls.
Well, as Coach Newton mentioned earlier, said the game is going to become more condensed. So somebody's going to be packing in, so you're actually playing in 1/3 of the field. So that's you're right, Mike. Some teams are just going to play that way. So, but another question I have two here, but I'll ask this one first. Do you encourage your players to referee in the off season, or once they have finished playing?
I'll take that quickly. I love having and we do this at camp, and we do it during practice, particularly in the springtime. We have our kids referee all the time, so they can experience what it's like. And we sit them down and we go, okay, so you're screaming and shouting on the field about that, but you won't even blow the whistle for the same thing when you're doing it. See how difficult the job is. So, I mean, we do that all the time. Whereas Todd does a rules survey, it's exposure for the players to understand, and I think that's really important. I want in the spring season, I don't have my assistant coaches or I referee the inter squad scrimmage. I'll take injured players or one of the additional players that we have and have them referee the game.
Yeah, it's I actually like it when a player starts talking too much about calls, because I do officiate typically, or because I want to control the whatever it might be. But if they start saying something, I often will say, why don't you just go do the line for a little bit and then go enjoy being an AR. They quickly learn to keep themselves quiet. They don't want that job. And they're not very good at it. So it's a useful tool. I don't do it often, but that keeps them quiet.
Yeah, we did the same at my former university. I haven't been here long enough to. We'd have our first job we had our players sign up for was officiating intramurals, men's intramurals too. So they'd get the full heat of it. And they'd walk away with so many experiences and a better understanding of how difficult that job is. We also had them coach, so they can understand that too.
Randy, you ready?
Yeah, we were the same as well, coaching, coach add on to what Tamar said, coaching, working camps, to referee each other, and then also in some other different environments. So did that at my former place, and we'll continue it here as well.
Okay, Coach Fontaine and Coach Samar, this is from Roger Morton. He would like to know that I'll just read it. Can you discuss some of your concerns that you have expressed where officials will card a female player for language, but not for a bad foul? Oh, this was a men's game, that would be a card. And they're both laughing.
Hey, Roger, you are missed.
Very
Yeah.
missed.
Wait, what? So what is the question? Describe that situation.
In other words, the young female player will say, oh, damn, I just missed that, a little more extensive, and then she'll get a card for that. But then there's a nasty foul where there's not a card, but in a men's game, it is a card. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work with some really great reps that understand there are certain differences, and then there's also, a lot of similarities in the game, and equity is difficult. I think equity is one of the hardest things to come by in everything that we do. We even find that in managing people, equity is such a big part of it. But when you're reffing or coaching a women's game and you're bringing the men's game into it, it's a bit of a tough pill to swallow because it's the women's game. So make it about the women's game. And that's something those players will respect. Coaches will respect too, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
Yes, and I also think just from the women's game that, sometimes I think because it's the women's game, they also forget. Just Mike was sitting on this earlier about, that the players are getting more savvy, and even in the women's game, they're getting more savvy. So they're willing to take shots on players they wouldn't take in the past. So you want to talk about changes that have happened over the last, 7 to 10 years. Girls are, starting to become a little more feisty, being more willing to pull the shirt and step on someone's foot or have the, that language. And we think because they're female, it's a little bit, that, I don't know, that it doesn't happen, I guess, sometimes, but yeah, I agree. Same thing as Samar. So.
This was an interesting question. And I've actually done this when I was a much younger man in my refereeing career. Players training with referees. Do you think that's a possibility, a good thing? I'm not talking about, playing. I'm talking about maybe training. There's a physical training of.
Paul, I think you might have muted yourself.
sorry, as referees, we go out and run 5 miles or do some sprints, do some whatever we need to do. Would it be beneficial, or is it possible for referees to train with players in the off season now? Obviously in the off season, it can't be during the season, obviously. Let me elaborate a little bit more. A couple years in the MLS, the referees would go to preseason training, and we would actually train with the players, and it's more of a breakdown of, okay, well, this referee has a reputation of being black and white, no personality, so we would be training with the players, break down that communication of, like, look, players are human, referees are human. I don't know if that would work in the collegiate ranks of referees and players. That's the question.
Yeah, I think from my perspective is, we're working with young kids that are inundated in so many ways. They're balancing academics, athletics, and then their social lives in a collegiate atmosphere. And something our staff is very conscientious of, and I'm conscientious of, is how much we're asking of them and how much information we're putting into them. I think the off season has the first part of the off season has the most potential for something like that. I do see the benefit in that. I can't remember who said it, but someone talked about building bridges between coaches and referees. The more that we can bring our two entities together and really encourage what the sport can do and what the sport gives us, we can certainly make a space for that. I think it's an incredible thing. Once, and I might be saying something that a lot of people know, but the way the NCAA breaks down the Division I and II seasons is typically, and this is an estimate, every school is going to be different, your first month and a half, you're limited in how much time you can be on the ball. NCAA limits that. So a lot of your training in an 8-hour week is going to be conditioning. And that's where I think there would be the most space for that, is that first month and a half. The next two or so months, you really get into, even though it's off season, it's preparation for the fall. So a lot more technical, tactical work, a lot more specific work. So the space for that would certainly be condensed, in my opinion, but certainly think it could be very beneficial in that first part of the spring season.
Okay, here's another question, I guess directed towards Brandy and Samar. So, and we've been told this as male referees from female referees. So I'm not going to say that it's true. I'm going to ask the experts, get it right from you guys. So male players will retaliate immediately. If you foul somebody, they're going to come back and retaliate in a very short period of time. The general rule. Females will wait and wait and wait and then retaliate 5 years later. So just trying to put that in perspective. So I'm just trying to figure out, what the deal is, hearing it from the pros here.
That time's shortening a little bit. I would say yes. There. If you're asking if there is more retaliation on the female side, I would say yes, and it is happening quicker. I would say that's what I meant earlier with the girls are becoming more savvy and understanding how to get those calls or make things happen or know when to hit somebody when someone's not paying attention. So I don't know. I do think it's happening a lot more often and quicker.
Yeah, generally speaking, we have a rule where we tell our players not to take it so personally if someone fouls them. It's not personal. It's just a moment in the game. And there can, I think it's a maturity thing too. The higher, even specifically speaking on the women's game, the higher the level, the less of that there is. There is some of that, yes, generally speaking.
So I have a question for all four coaches. For the first time ever, the NCAA put together points of emphasis for this year. And I don't know if you've seen them or not, but there's 4 of them. I'm just curious if you, in your own opinion, could pick one point of emphasis that you would like to see for the collegiate game to grow, as Coach Noonan has mentioned? For each of you, what would it be?
I'll speak. I have not seen the 4 points of emphasis yet. I think someone had a link to it in the chat, and I was like, "Oh, good. I'd like to see what those are." Is there a way for you to be able to let us know what those are?
Coach Noonan, they are number one, not in any order, by the way, but controlling overly aggressive play, tactical fouls or stopping a promising attack, differentiating between violent behavior 1, 2, and fighting. And the last one is better conduct in the technical areas. So I don't know if any of those maybe stand out more than others, Coach, but I'm kind of curious, and maybe we're missing one, what your thoughts would be.
For me, number one, controlling overly aggressive and rough play, overly aggressive behavior and rough play. Again, I'll go back to how compressed our seasons are. And if we lose one of our star players or a difference maker on the field, that's for 2 weeks, that's 4 games. That's potentially 12 points. That there's a big difference there. Whereas, in the pro game, there might be a little bit more time for healing and return to play. But the after effect as well that we have to consider as coaches, and Mike touched on this, as sports science is now a developing process to what we're doing, is we also can't return kids as quickly as we could, because we're smarter about it now. And we know there's a long-term, there can be long-term benefits to waiting a little bit longer. So a 2-week injury could end up being a 3-week injury, 4-week injury, simply due to, rough play or aggressive play. That's overlooked, and that could be a difference maker.
Coach Fontaine, how about for you?
Sorry, can you actually come back to me? They're wrapping up our camp. I need to give my keys to somebody. Sorry.
No problem. I know the life of a coach. Coach Noonan?
Yeah, I would. For me, it would be more the tactical fouling, and I think they go together with the rough play too, because as Todd alluded to, you want the game to run and you want the ball in play, and you don't want to have that many stoppages in the game. I think that at least within the conference that we predominantly compete in, sure, I'd like to see the technical areas in all of us better, but I think that if the other two are dealt with, then I think you'll see a knock-on effect in the technical area as well.
Coach Yeagley, how about for you?
I think the differentiating with the violent behavior is an interesting one on how to differentiate all that, but I think that has to get out of the game. So anything to be, again, very quick to make sure that doesn't have a place, but also understanding intent, and where there was there can be times I've seen it where it's like that was a foul. It wasn't even a foul, but the intent was really there. And I'd almost rather see a caution and where there's maybe a clumsy moment or an unintended consequence that sometimes gets, carded, or there's a more aggressive kind of tone and you can see it in the eyes of a player, and maybe coming back to give that card, even though that your player eluded this challenge. Those are tricky. And again, the best officials are able to kind of differentiate all those, or at least communicate that I was very aware of what I just saw. Your leash is super short, young man, and make it clear to them, and they'll listen.
Coach Fontaine, did we get those keys out?
Yeah, we got those keys out. Sorry. Yeah, so for me, I think, I agree with what Samar was saying, but I also agree with the stopping the promising attack. Especially, I think sometimes in the girls' side, it happens a little bit more often. It's quick call, and they're becoming more knowledgeable of the game, understanding when a quick counter is on, when you can take advantage of opportunities. And so I think, adding that one in there, or keeping that one in there is a great one to have.
So another question I have, a lot of you all alluded to communication, and I'm just kind of curious, are you guys seeking that out if you're lucky enough to have a fourth official? Maybe it's clarification from the AR who's closest to the bench, or you maybe seeking out it from the referee, because that's going to be tough because all of you also said you want the game to flow. So when it comes to communication, how is it best communicated in your terms?
I'll start for, at least from my thought. I mean, I wasn't too lucky enough to have a fourth official in our game. So fourth official would be great at this point for me. But I think even, we had on communication a lot, but sometimes for us, it's just a quick, hey coach, I got you. Like, something as simple as that can go a long way. I hear what you're saying, and that can still be in the run and flow of the play. Then if where it starts to progress and there needs to be more, that's understanding. So that's how you can still keep that flow. It's the same thing as when we communicate to our players, and we just want to know they got the message. Give us a thumbs up. Hey, I got it, coach. I'm good. Same thing, ref, that we want. Just, hey, we hear you. We got you. And I think that can go a long way and still keep that flow of the game until it becomes a point where you have to have that conversation.
I think it's a little bit of both. The AR could do a lot, and the fourth and more the fourth than the AR, but of just making sure that they're spending time and kind of working the touch line, both sides, giving little comments, letting that I have communicated that to the center, and not get in a protective mode. That also happens at times where it's like, I'm going to protect the center. I'm going to kind of dismiss or be very standoffish versus like, I hear you. I will communicate that. He's aware, she's aware. We've already chatted about it, and move on. So, some people put their guard up sometimes pretty quick. Maybe because their history or the other coach is really animated, whatever it might be, the guard comes up fast and you're like, can we just have a quick conversation here? It doesn't need to be heated. Just again, but I do feel that the center, though, giving you a gesture without having to stop the game. And I've had some just kind of run close to the touchline on a goal kick and just say, hey, Ty, we've got the message. You're good. We're addressing it without stopping it. Again, it's the official that also tells the player without stopping it, a quick message. Might have to leave the area I know you're supposed to run in certain patterns, but it might take a little detour of the pattern to come over by the bench.
And I think that all three are important. But it's and again, not because he's on the call, but I've had Ralph as a fourth, right? He's really good at, because he's been a coach, at diffusing situations, right? But there's a hierarchy to it too, from a coach's standpoint, right? And the fourth doesn't have as much control or quote unquote power as the AR, who doesn't have as much control or power as the center referee. So when the communication comes from the center, as Todd's talking about, that's generally more significant than if it comes from an AR or the fourth. But with technology and the headsets and those types of things, it's easy for the AR to say, coach, he's heard you, he's got it, because they're talking, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think it's a team, your team. And I think that, that those types of things should be discussed pregame with the referees. How are we going to communicate with the benches? Who's going to predominantly do that? How does the head referee want that done? And be proactive about it.
Yeah, I saw someone put in the chat, sometimes coaches want to talk right away. At times we're not able to talk. I think it goes back to what one of the coaches had said is just acknowledge that the coach has a question and that when the time's right, that can be addressed. Again, I don't remember who said this, but some coaches are still going to be pretty heated in that moment. But most coaches, I would like to think, are going to feel heard and patient enough to wait until they can understand what's going on in the game. And just that acknowledgement can go a long way. If there isn't a fourth official in the game, a fourth official can obviously help, relay some of that messaging. But if there isn't a fourth official, just acknowledging that the time might not be right for a conversation, but there will be a time to bridge that communication.
And yeah, we do stress when we talk to our referees, whether it's the preseason memo or whatever we have an opportunity to talk to our referees in a clinic such as this, a Zoom call, we tell them the same thing, so you're right. We're not going to stop play during the run of play, but there's, quite a few stoppages in college soccer, whether it be a caution, an injury, or something where we can go over and have that conversation. So we do urge that. And then, again, have that communication, and hopefully they can, understand, and hopefully the referee's calm enough to deliver the message.
I think too, Paul, to add on that is that I think it doesn't happen a lot, but having the official swing over and tell you if a player is at a line before the cards become needed. We often have the most, we can pull a player out of the game, and it protects the situation without giving a card that could send the player out. I think that's really powerful, and let us, manage that as well. Besides you, because you're like, man, this kid is doing something or saying something. No different if the goalkeeper's taking a lot of time on his distribution. He's, we all know that the 6-second rule is not really enforced, but point is, all that makes a difference of like, hey, you need to get your keeper to speed it up. I'm giving him some warnings, but he needs to speed it up. Or your player is saying something or doing something that my tolerance is less. I think that'd be helpful.
This may not be the most popular thing to say, but I think that if the referee doesn't communicate with the coaches, and if the coaches over communicate and they're acting out on the sideline, it shows an insecurity from each of the individuals. And I think that confident referees have no problem communicating. That's been my experience, right? And confident coaches know when and where to interject when it's needed. And I think that's really important. And that Paul, we talked earlier about the foul and saying, don't foul, right? Earlier in the call, I think that shows a little insecurity on the referee's fact, is that he doesn't want to call the foul, right? Or he doesn't know whether he should call the foul. It's like, your job is to administer the game. So I just think it shows a little bit of insecurity versus confidence from a communication standpoint.
Ralph, put you on the spot. You're the coach, who's now the referee. You've done the ARs, you've done the fourth officials, you've done whistles. So as a fourth official, what is your biggest challenge?
The sidelines. Dealing with that aspect, and I think that's why I'm a big proponent of communicating with one voice on the sidelines, and listening. And Samar spoke of that earlier, was putting on my coach's hat, and having been in that position, and trying to, without taking away from the job, my focus on the game, but trying to listen to that coach, and then share that concern with the referee, but with the officiating crew as a whole. And I think when I can interject and be that part of the game, where I can listen and then share that and allow the referee to continue to do his job on the field, then I think has become a very important piece for me.
Great, thanks, Ralph. Here's a question that, it's a kind of a general question, but I don't want it to be strictly related to officiating. So as coaches, you have many challenges. So I guess what are the challenges that you face? Not just during the season, but okay, now we're in preseason now. You're in training. Preseason starts in a couple of weeks. Then you have the season starting. So what are some of the challenges? It's mainly for the benefit of the people in this call to say, well, hell, they just all they do is coach. So we all know it's more than that. So what are some of the challenges?
That's how much time do we have, Paul?
It says 3 minutes and 30 seconds, Todd. It's all you.
Okay. 3.5 minutes.
Man, we're graying up for a reason. No, we got the best jobs. We all know it as coaches. We do. We have awesome jobs. But yeah, I mean, it goes well beyond the results and the pressures that any of us might feel at our schools or from just a pure job standpoint, from everything you do to impact these kids. And a lot of stuff we do off the field is not always related to necessarily preparing for our next opponent or analyzing our own team. It's all the things that go in between those. Certainly much different if you're a professional coach. So the job is all in taxing. We're never done with the day. But it's a labor of love. And obviously we, as coaches, we want to see that same passion with the officials, that they love what they do and they care about their work. And also I think we all could show some humility in moments that we made a mistake. I've loved it when an official a couple of weeks later says, "Hey, Todd, I missed that, or I should have gotten that better." It shows strength to me. It doesn't show weakness. And we have to do the same thing. I overreacted. I look back at the film and man, that was, sorry for getting all over you, but that's what I saw in the moment. If more of us do that, I mean, this is not all kumbaya before the game, every game, but on occasion it goes a long way. And I think a lot of the younger people in the game, it's harder for them. And so, man, we need mentors more than ever to help these younger coaches and officials know that you can make mistakes. Here's how you handle them. And I feel like there's a lot of that missing in some levels. You have to find more mentors in the game to help the younger coaches and officials.
I'm going to take it to another step. And I had a conversation with a coach a couple of years ago, and it really resonated with me. So the question is, what's the biggest reward?
Graduation day. I mean, for me, that's what it is. It's when you see them through to the end, and that you've made, young men into grown men and young women into grown women, and they're capable of handling. That's, you get the text, or that's the grateful text. I think humility and graciousness and gratitude is the dividends that we coach for, right? We're not football coaches. We're not basketball coaches. We're not baseball coaches getting paid millions of dollars. We're like Todd said, we do it because we love it. And I think that's what we have in common, Paul. The referees do it. It's the hardest job in the game, I think, but they do it because they enjoy it and they love it. And I'll say this, and again, I'm a little bit older than I was when I started. It was you and Paul, you and know well, is that I can't think of a referee or many referees who referee games that I've coached at who it looks as though they're doing it for any other reason other than they enjoy the game. They enjoy doing what they're doing. So I think we have that in common.
I mean, that's great, Mike. And when I talked to this coach, actually the coach was Bobby Clark, and he said the molding of the young men into mature, and graduation day. He said that was his biggest thrill of just having these young men with him and then seeing them succeed. So it's great. It really is great. Any last comments before we let you go? And
Yeah, I mean, this is just really neat. I think the coach has already said we do what we do because we love it, and I think if you simplify it, it's love for the game and people that are good at what they do as coaches. It's love for people and being able to manage people. And we recruit kids when they're sophomores, on the women's side at least. They're sophomores in high school, and seeing them through that's a 6-7 year process typically, and being able to see them succeed as people, as young women, and in their case men, it's incredible. But it's also about the people that are around the sport that we're around every day. Being asked to be on Zooms like this is a great part of what we do. Being able to build bridges to learn a little bit more through the questions. We might have done a lot of the talking, but I think the questions also said a lot to us, at least to me. One of my favorite texts that I received when I left my last institution was actually from a referee saying congratulations. And that was very meaningful to me. We're in this business because we enjoy people. And what you all do as officials, Mike hit the nail on the head, is truly because of a love for what you do and the sport, or so it seems. Thank you for putting up with us. We are a tough species to put up with. So thank you. And thank you for the time to be on this call.
Yeah, only thing I'll add to what they said is just I've been on a few different things with Roger before, and I just appreciate, just in my time of coaching, which is been about 14 years now, is just how much this has evolved for referees to want to grow and get better and allow for opportunities for us to speak and kind of help bridge that gap. So to every person that's on here, it's a huge opportunity, and to continue growing and learning. And I think we're only continuing to bridge that gap even more. So we really appreciate all of what you guys are doing to continue to learn and grow in the game. Because we know you're doing what's best because you enjoy it and you love it so much. So we appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Well, again, I want to thank you for your time. I mean, this is great. You all can see the comments in the chats. This is really terrific. This is something that is very worthwhile, beneficial to me, and to the referees on the call. And I want to thank Mike and Todd and Samar and Brandy for participating an hour and a half of your time, and also Ralph for getting it all together for us. We really do appreciate it, and we thank you. So I know we'll see some of you during the season, and we look forward to it. And again, thank you very much for being on the call. Good night.
Thanks, Paul.
Right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Nice.
Thank you, coaches.